Woodrow Wilson, the 28th President of the United States. Woodrow Wilson, a leader of the progressive movement, was the 28th President of the United States, 1913 to 1921. After a policy of neutrality at the outbreak of World War I, Wilson led America into war in order to make the world safe for democracy. Wilson was one of America's greatest presidents. His domestic program expanded the role of the federal government in managing the economy and protecting the interests of citizens. His foreign policy established a new vision of America's role in the world. And he helped to make the White House the center of power in Washington. Most historians rank him among the 5 most important American presidents, along with Washington, Lincoln, and the 2 Roosevelts. Woodrow Wilson is known for his accomplishments both before and during his presidency. Here are some of his major accomplishments. Education reform. Prior to becoming president, Wilson was president of Princeton University, where he reformed the curriculum and introduced the concept of the preceptorial system. As president, he signed the Smith-Lever Act, which established a nationwide system of agricultural extension services and helped establish land-grant colleges. Progressive reforms. Wilson was a leader in the progressive movement, which aimed to address social, economic, and political problems. As president, he signed the Clayton Antitrust Act, which strengthened antitrust laws and helped to break up monopolies. He also signed the Federal Reserve Act, which created the Federal Reserve System, the central banking system of the United States. Women's suffrage. Wilson supported women's suffrage and was instrumental in getting the 19th Amendment to the Constitution passed, which granted women the right to vote. World War I. Wilson is perhaps best known for his leadership during World War I. He initially tried to remain neutral but eventually entered the war on the side of the Allies. He formulated the 14 points, a set of principles that he hoped would lead to a lasting peace after the war. He also played a key role in the Treaty of Versailles, which officially ended the war. League of Nations. Wilson was a strong advocate for the creation of the League of Nations, an international organization aimed at preventing future wars. He played a key role in drafting the organization's charter and promoting its establishment. Like Roosevelt before him, Woodrow Wilson regarded himself as the personal representative of the people. No one but the president, he said, seems to be expected to look out for the general interests of the country. He developed a program of progressive reform and asserted international leadership in building a new world order. In 1917, he proclaimed American entrance into World War I a crusade to make the world safe for democracy. Wilson had seen the frightfulness of war. He was born in Virginia in 1856, the son of a Presbyterian minister who during the Civil War was a pastor in Augusta, Georgia, and during Reconstruction a professor in the charred city of Columbia, South Carolina. After graduation from Princeton, then the College of New Jersey, and the University of Virginia Law School, Wilson earned his doctorate at Johns Hopkins University and entered upon an academic career. In 1885 he married Ellen Louise Axon. Wilson advanced rapidly as a conservative young professor of political science and became president of Princeton in 1902. His growing national reputation led some conservative Democrats to consider him presidential timber. First, they persuaded him to run for governor of New Jersey in 1910. In the campaign, he asserted his independence of the conservatives and of the machine that had nominated him, endorsing a progressive platform, which he pursued as governor. He was nominated for president at the 1912 Democratic Convention and campaigned on a program called The New Freedom, which stressed individualism and states' rights. In the three-way election, he received only 42% of the popular vote but an overwhelming electoral vote. Wilson maneuvered through Congress 3 major pieces of legislation. The first was a lower tariff, the Underwood Act. Attached to the measure was a graduated federal income tax. The passage of the Federal Reserve Act provided the nation with the more elastic money supply it badly needed. In 1914, antitrust legislation established a Federal Trade Commission to prohibit unfair business practices. Another burst of legislation followed in 1916. One new law prohibited child labor, another limited railroad workers to an 8-hour day. By virtue of this legislation and the slogan, "He kept us out of war," Wilson narrowly won re-election. But after the election, Wilson concluded that America could not remain neutral in the World War. On April 2, 1917, he asked Congress for a declaration of war on Germany. Massive American efforts slowly tipped the balance in favor of the Allies. Wilson went before Congress in January 1918 to enunciate American war aims, the 14 points, the last of which would establish a general association of nations, affording mutual guarantees of political independence and territorial integrity to great and small states alike. After the Germans signed the armistice in November 1918, Wilson went to Paris to try to build an enduring peace. He later presented to the Senate the Versailles Treaty, containing the Covenant of the League of Nations, and asked, "Dare we reject it and break the heart of the world?" But the election of 1918 had shifted the balance in Congress to the Republicans. By 7 votes, the Versailles Treaty failed in the Senate. The president, against the warnings of his doctors, had made a national tour to mobilize public sentiment for the treaty. Exhausted, he suffered a stroke and nearly died. Tenderly nursed by his second wife, Edith Bowling Galt, he lived until 1924. Wilson is the only U.S. president buried in Washington, D.C. The 28th president is in a sarcophagus at the Washington National Cathedral. William Howard Taft and John F. Kennedy are interred at Arlington, Virginia.